everybody, welcome to the 2020 Make It Big conference. I'm your host, Beatrice Este with Big Commerce, and today I'm here with Richard Mogendorff, CEO and founder, and Alex Tovey, Chief Growth Officer at Like Digital. Thank you both for being here with us today, virtually all the way from Europe. We are so excited to have you as part of the Make It Big conference this year. Before we dive in, I'd love to have each of you introduce yourself and tell us how you got started in e-commerce.
Great. So I'm Richard. I am, as you say, the co-founder at Like Digital, and I've been in the e-commerce industry for about 15 years now, but in tech for 20 plus years. And I started in music, moved into the fashion world, and now at Like Digital, I lead up the technical team in terms of e-commerce platform and build.
Great. So I'm Alex Tovey, Chief Growth Officer. Essentially what I do at Like Digital is work with our clients to ensure that all of our success metrics for growth are kept front of mind. That could be sales, it could be engagement, it might be a collection of them all, really. And the way I got into e-commerce was many years ago. I started a creative agency, and it was pure creative output. And as the work changed to digital, I found the e-commerce game more enticing than just pure creation. So made the shift maybe 13 years ago now.
So the e-commerce industry is really shifting to a content-first approach, which as a content marketer is very exciting to see. Tell us why this is the case and how content is really helping drive the growth of businesses around the world.
Great. I think just to expand on your point initially, we saw this shift about 2 years back in the industry where the world was shifting from an owned e-commerce platform where you had to have a team of developers keeping the lights on, keeping it working all the time. And maybe you spent a lot less time on the actual site itself and on the growth of the site. So we saw this going back into sort of mid 2018 really. And we pivoted our team on the back of that to build out far more strong capability for e-commerce content. And Alex's role in particular about growing the customer's business. And Alex and the team he's built come from e-commerce, come from the real sort of inside of a business and understand what it means to really trade a site online, not just to build one. And what we find interesting, particularly with big commerce, is that we have that same shared philosophy where the platform itself should look after itself and the agency should really add value based on expertise, and that should be an ongoing challenge to prove our value as well.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's absolutely right. When we think about content first and how the importance of content, it's one of a series of firsts that come to mind now. Obviously, we talk mobile first because that's a very dominant channel. We talk social first in terms of brand engagement because it's the thing that people do pretty much every morning and every evening. It's their first engagement with the day for many people now. Of course, we talk content first because it's our opinion that everything that happens after the click, be that a paid ad, be that an organic result, everything that happens thereafter is content. And by taking a content-first approach, what we were asking very early on is, are we presenting the right content to the right people at the correct time for them to engage and then hopefully evolve and become a customer?
Awesome. And walk me through your reverse pyramid approach over at Like Digital.
I think, yeah, absolutely. So the best place, I think, to the reverse pyramid is in what it used to be. So that was a room full of developers, often with good beards, keeping the lights on the platform, so patching servers, updates and things. So if I were a brand working with an agency at that point, I might find that a large amount of my monthly spend would be going just on maintaining and not necessarily moving forward. I think the idea now is that where that's far less required if you use the right technology, you then have a top tier of experts who can really work on trading the platform. And that's where our content team specifically comes in.
Essentially, we're seeing this reverse pyramid being representative of quite a lot of shifts in our digital arena. So not just from the perspective of say e-commerce platforms, but across the board. So from our side, we look at that as it used to be that you had an amount of time with senior talent, and then you had juniors doing a lot of execution. Now, what we're noticing is today it's the other way around, because a lot of the services have become commoditized. So if you look at SEO, there's large parts of that now that you can outsource effectively. So this is representative of a value add, because really what you want to be paying for are the things that you cannot do yourself or can't be maybe more cheaply outsourced. And that's our approach as well. You get time with seniors, and we think that that's the best way to go about your content play as well. Pay for the senior time with your agency and try and insource the more junior talent.
Awesome. Well, you know me, I always love talking about our BigCommerce merchants. I know you guys recently worked with La Perla to help them create a content-first, just absolutely incredible customer experience. Talk to me about how you guys built that.
Absolutely. So what was key about their website in particular is it serves multiple global markets. So we have a Japanese native language site, we have a US and Canadian site, UK, Italy, Germany, France, etc. So we've got multiple languages working there together, and each of those languages serves its own specific content to that market. So we were able to use BigCommerce to give the various e-commerce teams the capability to build out that localized content as a starting point. And that content is on product page, but it's also about the brand and the rich heritage that they have as a brand as well, and how they express that. I'd also extend that to say that it's not just about isolated content pages. It's about that content living and breathing throughout the entire site. So as a user, my first interaction with the brand might be on a product detail page, for example. But even then, I can get an example of the brand history and the brand ethos just by the various bits of content I might consume at that point.
Yeah, sorry. I think Suzanne, who's the head of content at Light Digital, she would always call that that sort of the three pillars behind that as hero, help, and hub, which is looking at the content that you're presenting and the time you're presenting it and the place it's presented in, and ensuring that the right balance of hero content, which is your big brand messaging, your help content where people need guidance, and your hub content, which is your ongoing topics and how they disseminate across the website and beyond through your distribution channels. Bringing that balance and that sort of equation, if you like, and giving a scorecarding your content against effectiveness by mapping on the product detail page. Okay, if somebody's coming in far deeper in the funnel, how might I review the amount of content that's required to give somebody some brand messaging and some confidence messaging in there. But also then you've got the consideration of your help messaging. So why would you want to take people, as you know, out of their sales cycle to go and look for shipping information when it could be neatly placed on a page, or understanding how much depth there is in the knowledge of the product that somebody is looking at. A good example of that might be how you would write for a replacement part versus how you would write for a wedding dress on a product detail page. Could be wildly different, should be wildly different. But even in terms of how you attribute them to hero, help, and hub, because a replacement part, if somebody's coming on a product detail page, particularly from organic, they've searched precisely what they are looking for, and there's going to be very few variants on there. It's not so much of an emotional purchase. At the same time, something like a wedding dress, or in La Perla's case, a lingerie, can be an emotional purchase, and therefore the balance of hero and help content and how you might scorecard yourself would vary.
I think what's interesting at the moment is us as with that knowledge behind us, we are also consumers. And I found myself today buying face masks for my family, and it was definitely an emotional purchase, and I was committed emotionally to buying it. But when I got to checkout, I thought I'd go back and just check on the actual shipping time, and also on the washable, on how the masks, if they were washable or not. And I found that they were not actually that washable and flexible, and the shipping was going to take 6 to 7 days. So I dropped off at that point. And because that content wasn't surfaced to me at the right time, it just caused confusion in my journey. And it led to me ultimately abandoning my cart. So getting that tied in the journey a bit earlier would have perhaps persuaded me differently, or a bit of reassurance in the right way would have persuaded me differently.
It's absolutely incredible the experiences we can create when we combine content with best-in-class technology. So awesome work on that. I do want to shift gears here a little bit and to help our brands that are tuning into this session figure out what to include in their content philosophy to really make sure that they're honing in on that content-first approach.
When you're thinking about your strategy or your approach, the first thing you need to think about is your team and ensuring that all of the constituent voices are included in that team. Because I'm sure we've all seen a multitude of digital releases where brand message has been so strong that nobody knows what to do on the site. Or where UX language, for example, might be so sparse and clear that there's no love in the page anymore. So your first thing is making sure that the team is representative of the various constituencies that are required for a very good content. I think from there you can then start building around what's going to be appropriate, and equally having those voices share what they would like to get out of good content and good interactions with any page or with any strategy or so on and so forth. I think if you start from that position, if you're a smaller business or even a medium-sized business and you're just getting into content, that's an excellent start. What you will probably find quite quickly is you'll be missing some of the important pillars of successful content. One of them is going to be your digital tone of voice that might vary from your branded tone of voice. A vocabulary. So you have a tone of voice, you have a vocabulary which is appropriate at different times throughout the website. Work together to establish a vocabulary. Work together to understand what your users are looking for and how they are seeking success within an engagement. And that's very important because we know, you can look at data and you can look at usability studies and many other things, but your starting place for that is just empathy. Just empathy, understanding what somebody might want to take away from, as you said, the purchase of a wedding dress or so on. These are the pillars that you work together to say, okay, now we understand why we are making content and what success looks like from that content. And here are all the different people that need to feel satisfaction internally from that content. From there on in, you can then start having fun with the channels and the types that are available, be that user-generated content, be that video content, be it repurposed content, which can be fun in its own right. Then you can start playing with the types and then the channels of which you're going to share that content. So you can see that's how we would sort of frame that with a client or with anybody that would talk to us about content. Your team and their constituent voices, the rationale why you're making content, what the user's going to want to take away from it, what the success looks like. Do this empathetically, so don't talk in your own voice anymore. Now talk as the user, and then start having fun with your digital tone of voice, with your digital vocabulary and the channels and your creative expression. Does that give you a bit of thought behind the many parts? It's not as easy as some people often have these sort of black and white questions on things like this. So should we use this channel or this type of content? Well, the question's not so much yes or no in many cases. It's how you can own it, how you can be authentic in doing so, and does it serve a purpose for you, and what your user's going to take away from you using that type of content.
One of my favorite parts about content marketing is that you can really create content for multiple use cases. Your work just really goes a long way. So what's the best way for brands to really extend the use of their content?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very interesting time for content from that perspective, because there are more and more channels available to market your content. Distribution channels are a critical factor within your content marketing strategy. So with that in mind, you have lots and lots of ways to reinterpret your messages creatively and in the context of which the user will engage with them. I think as Richard quite rightly said, there's knowing everything about the product that you're buying and the brand that you're buying from is the affinity part of that. And you dial that up and down as and where appropriate. I'm not going to bore you in the shopping cart with some of that messaging anymore, because I've already done the job of persuading you to go on the journey of buying my product. At that point, I might want to dial up some of the other messaging that are going to be a greater concern to you at that moment, be that your delivery mechanisms or the reminder of during COVID times, which are unusual, that your delivery will be there. We're dependable still. All of a sudden, our business value, which might have taken secondary importance, when dialed up alongside a brand message, becomes something quite interesting and almost commercially minded, which you should be for your content, irrespective of how much brand you need in there. It should be commercially minded. That placement becomes a very, very important pillar to as we said, content to drive growth.
I think it's really important for brands to understand the time that it takes them to effectively do their marketing and effectively do their user experience, because the reality is content bleeds into all of those things. So how can brands really find a balance in their content marketing strategy?
I mean, you have to work with the resource that you've got, and you can't do anything other than that. So you have to balance your time, and you have to make sure that you know what your focal points are. As my friend of mine used to say, that your strategy really, when it starts executing, you can't run around like Yosemite Sam firing all of your ammunition off in every direction. You've got a revolver, you've got 6 bullets, and they all need to hit target. And that's ultimately what your resource planning is going to be about. You've got a handful of chances and a handful of resource available to you, and you want to focus that into the areas that are going to give you the greatest ROI and are going to help you deliver on the goals that you need to. So your practicalities are going to help you at first with those sorts of things. I think that's where these, we've talked about them before, these canvases come in very handy, like simple marketing canvases. You can do the same with your content. A simple content canvas allows you to see everything in a snapshot, a single page, and you can start saying to yourself, okay, well, we've got this amount of time available, and we have these amount of things to create, and these amount of successes that we need to achieve for our clients, be that product descriptions, be that more editorial-based articles. And you just take the time to plan out what that looks like and how your resource is going to be best spent. And of course, what you hope to achieve is that success begets more success. So as you become more and more successful with creating and seeding your content, you can internally justify more and more budget against it, because you'll have a greater case for the business case is going to be there. So I think that's kind of how you would go about balancing what might seem an unimaginable mountain of things that need to be achieved to something very manageable and executable from a business perspective.
And before we wrap up the session, I do want to talk about brands with a prolonged customer cycle, because I really think content can help them win here, especially. So I know you guys worked with a brand, One and Only. They are a travel booking company. Walk us through how they've been using content to really help them win.
Mapping your content and how much weight you put on the various parts, be it brand or be it UX or the softer messaging and the more sales activation messaging. It's dependent partly on your customer life cycle. So Richard quite rightly talked about a luxury hospitality, and we work with One and Only hotels and resorts, for example. And we know that there are times where the life cycle can be really quite long. And then not long from visit to booking, but then a booking to stay. Understanding what the needs are and feeding that nurture content to keep people engaged is very important balance to bring. But then, of course, as Richard said, recognizing the fact that at different times of engagement, people are different personas. Like, we all start life with our digital projects. Let's create some personas. That's brilliant. But quite often, you are multiple personas at once. And there's some very clever tools now that will allow you to recognize which hat you might be wearing at that time. For example, are you looking to book a holiday with your wife and go away as a couple? Or maybe it's going to be as a family, maybe a multi-generational family. All of those things, you might be a different persona at different times. Clever use of your journeys and then the content will allow people to engage at the time and with the sort of almost the hat of that persona when it suits them. And I think that those two things can be really quite complex, But if you take the time to sit down and plan it and understand that customer life cycle and understand the personas and where the crossover points are and so on, quite quickly you start to get a vision on what to say to people at the right times, very, very effectively. Of course, you've got to make sure that when you are taking that approach, something that's quite as complex as a very long purchase cycle. Car, for example, is a long purchase cycle, which is why, of course, promoting your parallel products like finance help people get engaged. By the way, when you're planning all of that out, you quite quickly see the bigger picture. You quite quickly see how you're going to strategically deploy content in a way that's going to keep delivering value to the reader, even when they come in and out of the buying cycle, or the buying cycle doesn't reinitiate for a significant amount of time. But actually, with a bit of patience and some understanding, you can provide meaningful content and meaningful moments within that content to really great effect.
And last but not least, for those tuning into this session, what are a few key takeaways you'd like them to walk away with?
Susanna, head of content's favorite: balance things against hero, help, and hub. Make sure you have a healthy blend. It can't all be brand, and often content is ends up falling on marketing or brand's kind of remit, but it can't all be brand. It has to be a blend of your hero content, your big brand messages, your help content that guide people to making the right decision, and your hub content, which is your expandable themes and topics. The next thing is definitely a big takeaway is make sure that it isn't the responsibility of one person, that therefore you can start having multiple attendees at your content sessions, see things from different perspectives, and ensure that all of the different sides of your business are reflected within the content at the right times. I think definitely start taking an approach that you can do, and all businesses can do this, which is content first. Remember, not just content is everything that you present is content, from your product descriptions, the products themselves. I mean, we've seen COVID has shown us these wildly unusual statistics around how long people are just browsing, because why not? It's content. I'm looking at a pair of shoes, it's content. So content first will help you think to yourself after the click, what am I going to show to people, and how do I consider content now I know it is the very first thing that people will engage with one way or another once they've arrived on my site. Then you can start knitting around that, of course, where they came from, what was the last message they saw, and so on, to be very strategic about it. So I think they're the three takeaways: hero, help, and hub. Make sure that multiple people are around the table, and start considering that everything that happens after the click is content.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Richard and Alex, for joining us again virtually all the way from Europe. And of course, for being great partners to us here at BigCommerce and helping us make it big.
Thank you. We're very happy to have attended.
Thank you.
That was a great session with Richard Mogendorff and Alex Tovey of Like Digital. Be sure to engage with us on social media using the hashtag MakeItBigConf and share what you've learned. If you're looking for more insights, be sure to tune in to more Make It Big conference sessions by heading over to www.bigcommerce.com/makeitbig.